Blackbeard, everybody's heard the name, right? The notorious pirate, the fearsome figure, all the smoke and the legends. Well, what if I told you there's like a whole lot more to his story? Let's dive into Blackbeard's world using, well, that podcast episode you wanted to explore, a little deeper.
It's really kind of amazing how easily history can become, well, myth.
Yeah.
Especially with figures like Blackbeard.
Yeah.
I mean, this deep dive, this is going to take us way beyond the buried treasure and all the, swashbuckling adventure stuff to uncover what made this guy so enduring, what made him last.
Okay, so this podcast, it touched upon Edward Teach's early life. That's Blackbeard's, that's his real name. And it seems like he had some experience as a privateer before going full pirate. Was that a common career move back then? It seems like kind of a big jump.
You might be surprised. Back then, during what historians call, the Golden Age of Piracy, the line between being a privateer and being a pirate out now, in the Caribbean, super blurry.
Okay.
So picture this, okay? It's the early 1700s. You've got the War of Spanish Succession raging all over the place, and the Caribbean is like, this central hub for maritime trade, just overflowing with riches. Now, privateers, they were essentially licensed pirates, right? Hired by governments to disrupt, their enemy shipping. But the thing is, the allure of all that wealth and freedom, well, it often led these privateers to become, pirates. The real deal.
Oh, wow. So a privateer was basically like a legal pirate, like sanctioned by the government?
Exactly. And with this war, you got a huge surplus of really skilled sailors.
Right.
And tons of opportunities for plunder. So this whole, privateer to pirate pipeline, it became pretty common.
That makes a lot of sense. It's almost as if all the rules just kind of went out the window and all that chaos.
Yeah. It was a time of incredible opportunity for ambitious people like Blackbeard, but, it was also incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about Blackbeard's rise to infamy. I mean, the podcast really emphasized his theatrical side, particularly that whole thing with the burning fuses in his beard.
Yeah.
Was that like a common tactic back then, or was he really just trying to make a statement?
Well, understandably, firsthand accounts from Blackbeard's enemies, they're a little scarce.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But think about it. The psychological impact of tactics like that, in that era of close quarters combat, can't be overstated. The smoke, the smell of the sulfur, and then you see those fuses burning as he's coming at you.
Oh, man.
It was calculated, right? It was all about instilling fear, uncertainty, giving him a real edge in battle.
So it's like psychological warfare, but on the open seas.
Exactly.
But, okay, theatrics aside, the podcast also made it clear that Blackbeard was way more than just smoke and mirrors, right? He captured La Concorde, that was a massive French slave ship, and turned it into his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. That suggests some really serious tactical skill, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Right.
Blackbeard wasn't just charismatic. This guy was a shrewd strategist.
Yeah.
That capture, along with his really audacious blockade of Charleston,
right.
He held hundreds of ships hostage. This demonstrates real ambition, incredible organizational skills, and a deep understanding of naval warfare. We're not talking about the actions of a simple showman. These reveal a really calculated and ambitious mind.
So he wasn't just intimidating his way through the Caribbean. He was disrupting trade and really challenging some major colonial powers.
Exactly. Blackbeard's actions weren't just, a nuisance to the authorities. It was a direct challenge to their control over these vital trade routes. He was, in many ways, he was a real thorn in the side of these emerging empires, which ultimately led to, his downfall.
Now that's really interesting. Let's talk more about that. The podcast mentioned increasing pressure from those colonial authorities, to deal with Blackbeard. They even put a bounty on his head. Seems like they meant business.
Oh, yeah. So
what was the political climate like back then that made stopping him, such a huge priority?
Well, piracy, it's romanticized today, but back then it was a major problem for these empires that were trying to, establish their power.
Right.
And it wasn't just about stolen goods. It was a direct challenge to their authority, their control over those trade routes.
Makes sense.
Blackbeard's success, it meant that their grip on power, it was vulnerable, and they couldn't tolerate that. Taking down someone as notorious as Blackbeard, that was a way for them to really assert their dominance, send a message that, we're the ones in control here.
It was a power play. Yeah, The podcast introduced us to Lieutenant Robert Maynard, the guy who was tasked with actually bringing Blackbeard down. And he just seemed, I don't know, utterly determined to end Blackbeard's, I don't know, reign of terror.
Well, Maynard, I mean, he was a seasoned naval officer. He was chosen specifically because of his experience and his tenacity.
Sounds intense.
Oh, yeah. And the podcast, it highlighted that final encounter, right, near Ocracoke Island. Brutal confrontation.
Yeah. From how they described it, it sounded like something straight out of a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Blackbeard, even though he was outnumbered, he put up a heck of a fight.
Oh, yeah. Even facing those odds, Blackbeard fought with this incredible ferocity. I mean, the podcast mentioned he was wounded over 20 times from cutlasses, gunshots before he finally went down. It said that when he died, he had 5 bullets in him and a cutlass through his neck.
Oh, my gosh.
Talk about going out swinging. It's a real testament to his resilience, and the sheer terror that he instilled in his opponents. But Maynard, he had a few tricks up his sleeve, too.
Right, like hiding all his men below deck.
Yeah.
So Blackbeard would think that he'd won the battle.
Exactly.
That's some next-level strategic thinking.
Yeah, Maynard's strategy, it really shows a shift that was happening in naval warfare at that time. It wasn't just about brute force anymore. It was about outsmarting your opponent, exploiting those weaknesses, using some really clever tactics.
Wow.
This clash between Blackbeard and Maynard, well, it really marked a turning point.
Yeah.
It showed the move towards a much more calculated and strategic approach to naval battles.
It sounds like the end of an era.
In a lot of ways, it was.
And speaking of endings, I mean, the podcast touched upon all those mysteries surrounding Blackbeard's death, all the unsolved mysteries, whispers of buried treasure. It seems like the intrigue, it doesn't end with his death. Why do you think Blackbeard continues to capture our imaginations even after all these centuries?
Blackbeard, in a lot of ways, he embodies the archetype of the pirate, right? The rebel, the adventurer, this figure who's operating completely outside the normal rules of society.
Plus, there's like all that mystery, right? Surrounding his death, undiscovered treasure, stories about how ruthless he was. It adds to his legend.
Absolutely. It's the unknown. That's what keeps us fascinated. We want answers, right? So we try to fill in those blanks, those gaps with our own interpretations. It makes historical figures like Blackbeard, well, they become ripe for storytelling, right?
Yeah.
It lets them kind of transcend time.
It's like he's become this blank canvas in a way that we can kind of project our own, fascination with rebellion and adventure on and the lure of the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes studying history so captivating. We're piecing these fragments together of the past, and we're always, dealing with these gaps, these uncertainties.
Trying to separate the man, Edward Teach, from this myth, this legend of Blackbeard.
That's the challenge, right? But it's also the beauty of it. I mean, we'll never have all the answers. We'll never have the complete picture. But it doesn't make the exploration any less, exciting. If anything, it makes it more exciting because it forces us to question our assumptions, to really look at things from different perspectives, and to admit that history, it's rarely black and white.
Yeah, it's more like that smoky haze surrounding Blackbeard, out there on the high seas, kind of mysterious and forever captivating.
And just like those burning fuses that he had, Blackbeard's story, it continues to really capture our imaginations. I mean, even after all these centuries.
That's a really powerful image to end on. We've journeyed through the life and times of Blackbeard, right? We explored the man, the myth, and the world that shaped him. And it's a good reminder, I think, that history, it's kind of like a tapestry, all these threads of truth and legend and that just undeniable allure of the unknown. So next time you hear, a story from the past, I really encourage you to dig a little deeper, embrace that mystery, and keep in mind that sometimes the most captivating stories, they're the ones with a little gray area in them. Until next time, everybody, keep exploring.